You are not going to believe what happened the moment that box opened, and I promise you this is not clickbait, this is not exaggeration, and this is definitely not what anyone expects when they spend luxury-level money on something as simple, as basic, as universally understood as a candle. I sliced through the tape, lifted the lid, peeled back the packaging, and for a split second, everything looked exactly how it should. Clean glass, smooth wax, elegant label, premium presentation. The kind of aesthetic that whispers curated, aspirational, elevated. And then I looked closer. I leaned in. I tilted it toward the light. I actually blinked because I thought maybe I just wasn't seeing it properly. There was no wick, not bent, not trimmed too short, not tucked slightly below the surface. Just gone. Completely absent. A perfectly smooth, untouched slab of wax staring back at me like it had never intended to be lit in the first place. And that's when the disbelief kicked in, because this wasn't a $12 impulse buy from a discount shelf. This was $64. $64 for a candle that cannot perform the single task candles have been performing for centuries. Ignite. Now, let that sink in. $64. Not for a designer handbag. Not for a 5-star tasting menu. Not for a limited edition fragrance crafted in Grasse. For a candle. And not just any candle, but one positioned as refined, curated, aspirational. A lifestyle statement. A piece of ambience meant to transform a room into something serene and elevated. Except ambience requires flame. And flame requires a wick. And this candle had none. The irony would be funny if it wasn't so absurd. The label on the bottom reportedly instructs buyers to trim the wick to 1/4 inch before lighting. Trim what exactly? The invisible one? The hypothetical wick? The conceptual thread that never made it into production? Because when you flip over a luxury product and it confidently instructs you to maintain something that does not physically exist, you move past disappointment and into confusion. At first, it would be easy to dismiss this as a one-off manufacturing glitch. Mistakes happen. Even high-end brands have occasional slip-ups. But here's where it gets interesting. It wasn't just one person. It wasn't a single frustrated customer venting into the void. Screenshots began circulating. Photos appeared online. Different buyers, different locations. Same issue. A small hole in the center of the wax where a wick might have been intended but never installed. Others reported an entirely smooth surface, as though the candle had skipped the most essential step in its creation. And when multiple consumers independently describe identical defects, the conversation shifts. It stops being about bad luck and starts being about pattern recognition. Think about the simplicity of the product itself. A candle is not a microchip. It is not a smartphone with layered circuitry and delicate software integrations. It is wax, a container, and a wick. That is the blueprint. That is the formula humanity has mastered for generations. So when the simplest, most non-negotiable component allegedly goes missing, people begin to ask bigger questions. Was quality control rushed? Was there pressure to meet demand? Did oversight slip in the scramble to launch? Because at $64, you are not just purchasing scented wax. You are purchasing the promise that someone checked. You are purchasing the assumption that luxury pricing reflects luxury scrutiny. Premium cost creates a psychological contract. When a brand plants itself firmly in the high-end category, consumers compare automatically. They think of heritage fragrance houses. They think of brands known for meticulous consistency. They expect flawless presentation and performance that aligns with the story being sold. And if that story feels even slightly disconnected from reality, the disappointment multiplies. If this candle had cost $12, the reaction might have been irritation. At $64, it becomes a debate about credibility. And then there's the scent, marketed as California poppy, poetic, sun-drenched, golden hills and late afternoon light bottled into wax. Except California poppies are widely known for having little to no noticeable scent. They are stunning visually, vibrant orange petals that define landscapes, but fragrant? Not particularly. So consumers began asking the obvious question, what exactly is this supposed to smell like? Is it symbolic? Is it interpretive? Is it aesthetic over botanical accuracy? To be fair, many fragrance names lean into mood rather than literal replication. Ocean breeze does not come directly from the sea, but when scrutiny is already building, every detail gets magnified. And then came the customer service angle, which may have amplified everything further. Several buyers claimed they reached out expecting the most basic resolution: a replacement, a refund, a straightforward explanation. Some allege they received automated responses. Others say follow-ups went unanswered. There are also reports that the website enforces strict return policies, with limited refund flexibility. Now, in luxury retail, firm policies are not unusual, but defective merchandise shifts the equation. If an item cannot perform as advertised, expectations change instantly. Silence, whether intentional or logistical, reads as indifference in the age of social media. And when frustration feels unheard, it rarely stays private. It becomes screenshots. It becomes threads. It becomes viral. But here's where it gets interesting. This controversy didn't unfold in a vacuum. It landed at a moment when public perception surrounding the broader brand ecosystem was already complicated. Reports had circulated about media ventures that struggled to meet performance expectations. Headlines had already shaped narratives about momentum and execution. So when this candle issue surfaced, it didn't feel isolated. It felt connected. Fair or unfair, timing matters. And when scrutiny is high, even a small spark can resemble a signal fire. The internet, as it often does, began turning the situation into metaphor. A wickless candle, a luxury image struggling to ignite, a brand promising glow yet facing questions about follow-through. Symbolism spreads fast online. A single defect becomes representative of something larger. Whether the production issue was widespread or limited to a batch, perception does not wait for internal data. It moves at the speed of screenshots. Now, let's zoom out. Business launches are messy. Even major corporations stumble in early rollouts. Suppliers miss details. Quality checks fail. None of that automatically signals collapse. It signals growing pains. But when you operate in the celebrity sphere, you skip the slow trust-building phase traditional startups rely on. Fame grants instant visibility, and visibility invites instant scrutiny. Every misstep is magnified. Every flaw becomes commentary. And that brings us to the larger question. Would you spend $64 after hearing these reports? Would you feel confident pressing checkout? Or would you hesitate, waiting for clarification? Because luxury brands do not just sell products. They sell belief. Belief in taste. Belief in refinement. Belief that every detail has been considered before it arrives at your door. When that belief cracks, even slightly, customers question more than the item. The deciding factor is response. Clear communication. Swift resolution. Accountability. Because in modern consumer culture, perception compounds faster than profit. A single flawed shipment can be corrected. A lingering narrative of doubt is harder to extinguish. So what began as a missing wick transformed into something far bigger than wax and glass. It became a debate about standards, about value, about whether premium pricing reflects premium execution. And the real test is not the candle itself. It is what happens next. Because brands are not judged by perfection. They are judged by how they respond when perfection slips. And that's the part we're watching now. But here's where it gets interesting. The story didn't cool down. It intensified. What could have quietly faded into a minor quality control correction began evolving into something far more combustible, because the internet doesn't just react. It investigates, it connects dots, it builds narratives, and once a narrative starts forming, it rarely shrinks. It expands. As more unboxing videos surfaced, viewers started slowing footage down, zooming in, analyzing the wax surface like forensic examiners. Some candles reportedly showed a tiny puncture hole where a wick may have once been placed. Others appeared completely untouched, smooth from edge to edge, as if the final assembly stage had simply been skipped. And that visual inconsistency alone raised eyebrows. Because in manufacturing, repetition is the foundation. A flaw repeated isn't random. It suggests a process gap. And then came the pricing comparisons. Side-by-side screenshots began circulating online. $64 positioned next to established heritage candle houses known for decades of craftsmanship. Consumers weren't just comparing fragrance notes anymore, they were comparing reputations. When you enter that tier, whether fairly or not, you step into the ring with brands that have built trust slowly over generations. And trust is not built by aesthetics alone. It's built by reliability. The debate shifted from, is this defective, to, what does this say about oversight? Because here's the uncomfortable truth about luxury positioning. Once you adopt the language of exclusivity and refinement, you inherit the burden of excellence. You're no longer judged as a newcomer. You're judged as a contender. And contenders are expected to deliver. At the same time, defenders emerged. Some buyers claimed their candles arrived perfectly intact, wick-centered, fragrance noticeable, packaging pristine. That contrast complicated the narrative. If some shipments were flawless while others allegedly arrived incomplete, then the issue might not be universal. It might be batch-specific. It might be logistical. It might be something entirely mundane behind the scenes. But perception rarely pauses for nuance. And perception, especially online, thrives on amplification. One viral clip leads to reaction videos. Reaction videos lead to commentary threads. Commentary threads turn into broader cultural debates. Soon, the wick wasn't just a wick. It was a symbol, a shorthand reference in comment sections. Did it come with a wick? Became both literal and metaphorical. That's the power and danger of internet symbolism. But here's what makes this moment particularly delicate. Celebrity-driven brands operate in a different ecosystem than anonymous startups. When a private small business experiences a manufacturing hiccup, the story often stays within customer service inboxes. But when a globally recognized public figure launches a product, every detail is magnified under stadium lighting. Success is louder. Mistakes are louder. And then came another layer: expectation versus identity. The brand positioning leans heavily into curated lifestyle, attention to detail, thoughtful presentation, the promise of refinement. So when the simplest functional element appears missing, critics see contradiction. And contradiction fuels conversation more than clarity ever could. Now, step back for a second. Even large corporations with billion-dollar valuations have faced defective batches. Electronics shipped with missing components. Apparel lines launched with stitching flaws. Beauty brands were called products due to packaging malfunctions. Imperfection in itself isn't catastrophic. The difference lies in response. Because when tension rises, customer service becomes the pressure valve. Swift acknowledgement cools flames. Silence accelerates them. Consumers don't expect flawlessness. They expect accountability. And in the absence of clear public messaging, speculation fills the vacuum. Some buyers reportedly described difficulty navigating return links. Others claimed policy language felt rigid. Whether those experiences were isolated or systemic, the perception began shaping commentary. And perception, again, moves faster than official statements. But here's where it gets even more layered. Timing. Timing in business can be everything. This candle controversy didn't emerge during a quiet season. It surfaced amid ongoing conversations about media ventures, brand expansions, and public reinvention. When scrutiny already exists in the atmosphere, any new issue attaches itself to pre-existing doubt. Fair or unfair, that's how momentum works. Critics began framing the candle as part of a broader pattern. Supporters countered that backlash often snowballs disproportionately around public figures. Both perspectives gained traction. And as the debate widened, the product itself almost became secondary. What people were really arguing about wasn't wax. It was credibility. It was execution. It was whether image and output were aligned. And that's when the legal and regulatory whispers entered the conversation. Not accusations, whispers. Consumers began referencing general consumer protection standards. The idea that if a product does not perform as described, questions of compliance can arise. No confirmed actions. No official investigations. Just the reality that when enough customers publicly claim identical issues, oversight discussions sometimes follow. Even the mention of that possibility changes tone. Meanwhile, others shifted focus to branding psychology. Luxury isn't defined solely by price. It's defined by experience. From checkout to unboxing to first use. If any stage feels inconsistent, the aura dims. And aura in the lifestyle market is everything. But here's the twist within the twist. Controversy can also create curiosity. Some viewers admitted they now wanted to purchase the candle purely to test it themselves, to verify whether the missing wick narrative was exaggerated or accurate. Attention, even critical attention, drives visibility, and visibility can translate into sales as easily as it can into skepticism. So now the story stands at a crossroads. If the issue was limited to a small production batch, transparent communication could resolve it swiftly. If quality control adjustments are already underway behind the scenes, stabilization is entirely possible. Many brands have weathered louder storms and recovered stronger. Because here's the deeper truth beneath all the drama. Business is iterative. Launches evolve. Systems refine. Mistakes become lessons. The determining factor is leadership response. Do they clarify? Do they correct? Do they reinforce standards publicly? Or do they allow speculation to define the narrative? And this is where suspense lingers. We don't have internal data. We don't see factory floors. We don't have shipment logs. What we have are consumer experiences, viral clips, and a growing debate about expectation versus delivery. The candle may ultimately prove to be a minor hiccup inflated by online momentum, or it may signal operational gaps requiring attention. At this moment, it's impossible to declare definitively. What is undeniable, however, is the broader lesson unfolding in real time. In the luxury arena, perception is currency. It compounds just like revenue. When perception strengthens, growth accelerates. When perception fractures, recovery demands transparency and discipline. So the flame question remains, not whether the candle lights, but whether the brand narrative reignites with clarity and control. Because this conversation is no longer about wax. It's about trust. And trust, once questioned, requires more than aesthetic packaging to restore. And if you think this was the peak of the unfolding drama, just wait.